Another self-drafted project today using the Lutterloh system and only my hip measurement. This simple skirt is pattern 10 from supplement 310. In this video, I will give a quick overview of the drafting process and then we will sew the entire skirt together from start to finish. I hope you join me. Let's get started. Here are my tools, and from the pattern binder, I've chosen this simple skirt. The pattern is on the back of the binder sheet and I've made a copy to work with. I cut out each pattern piece so I have my front, back, and waistband. Starting with the front piece, I tape it onto a large sheet of paper. Placing my pin in the tape measure at my hip measurement of 88 centimeters, I pin it to the pattern at the cross marking and we're ready to pivot and mark each plot point. I'll start at the bottom of the skirt where I see this number 33 labeled. Placing the tape measure along the number, I find 33 on my tape measure and make my first dot. I continue for each dot, then I connect all of the dots with my rulers and transfer any notes from the pattern piece, such as the fold line and grain line. For the dart, I briefly remove my pattern piece and mark the dot where the pin had been. Now I can extend lines to the other dots to form my dart. I also add seam allowance, 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters for the seams and 1 inch for the hem. The process for the back skirt piece is exactly the same. I make all of the dots, connect them, transfer all of the labels, form the dart, add seam allowance, and cut. Now for the waistband piece, all we have to do is create a piece using the dimensions listed. Here we have 83 centimeters by 5 centimeters. I measure and draft this rectangle, also adding seam allowance, grain line, labels, and these rulers also have button circles, so I can trace this shape onto the back waistline. This piece will be folded in half and interfaced, so I'll mark the fold line and cut it out. My 3 pieces are now ready to be cut in fabric. So I'll cut each piece, also grabbing a zipper and a button, and we're ready to sew. The first thing I'm going to do is finish the side edges for my front piece, as well as finishing the center and side edges for both back pieces. Now I'll pin each of the darts I've transferred to the wrong side of my fabric for both of my back pieces and both darts on the front piece. Then we'll sew each of the 4 darts in the same way, starting from the top to the point, leaving thread tails at each point so you can tie them in knots. And then press each of your darts toward their respective centers. Place your front and back pieces right sides together and pin the side seams. Then I'll sew each side seam with a 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. And press your seams open. Now I'm going to place the center back pieces right sides together, and I'm going to start pinning at the notch I transferred from my pattern piece. And then continue pinning from the notch to the bottom of the skirt. Then I'll sew from the notch to the bottom of the skirt with a 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, backstitching at the notch to secure. And press that sewn portion open. To prepare for installing the zipper, we're going to press both sides of the unsewn seam allowance at 2 different measurements. I'm going to press the right side of the skirt as worn to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. And I'm going to press the left side of this opening to the wrong side by 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters. Now I'll turn my skirt right side out, with the right side of my fabric and the right side of my zipper facing me. I'm going to place the right zipper tape underneath the right side of the back skirt. I want the top zipper stop to be 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters below the top raw edge of the skirt. And I want those right zipper teeth to be pressed right up against the fold that I created with the iron, and pin in place. Now I'm going to edge stitch close to the folded edge of that back opening from the top to the bottom of the slit, back stitching at the bottom to secure. Now that I have the right half of my zipper installed, I'm going to take the left side of the zipper tape and place it right sides together with that left seam allowance, so that the edge of the zipper tape lines up perfectly with the finished edge of my fabric. And again, we want the top zipper stop to be 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters from the top raw edge of the fabric, and pin in place. Sew close to the zipper teeth from the top to the bottom of this back opening. The difference in the pressing of those seam allowances on either side of that zipper allow for a tiny lip of fabric to cover the zipper teeth on the left side. Now we're going to top stitch from the top to the bottom of the left side of the zipper with a 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. And when you get to the bottom of the zipper, pivot your stitching horizontally to stitch to the seam line. For the waistband, I've cut a 1-inch wide strip of interfacing, which I'm going to fuse to the wrong side of my waistband, fusing it to the half of the waistband that will be on the inside of the garment. And also for the facing portion of the waistband, I folded my seam allowance to the wrong side. I also want to press the waistband in half wrong sides together, right along the top of my interfacing, to form a crease down the middle. I'm going to start attaching the waistband to the top of the skirt, right sides together. For the left side of the skirt, I want to make sure that the waistband extends beyond the top of the slit by 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters. And pin in place. Then I'll continue pinning all the way around. After you've pinned all the way around, you should have material from the waistband extending beyond the right side of the back skirt, which we'll trim later. Sew all the way around the top of the skirt with a 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Now my waistband is attached and I've pressed my seam allowance up toward the waistband. For the left side of the skirt, I'm going to fold the waistband in half along the pre-pressed line, right sides together. You want the pressed crease of the seam allowance that we pressed to the wrong side earlier to meet the seam line on the front visible side of the skirt, the seam line that was created when we stitched the waistband to the skirt. And pin in place. Sew vertically from the top to the bottom of the waistband so that the stitching matches up perfectly with the folded edge of that zipper. For the right side of the waistband, I'm going to fold it in half in the exact same way as I did on the left. And I'll pin that extension in place to secure. I'm going to draw myself a stitching line on the waistband that's 1.5 inches away from the zipper, parallel to the zipper. And then I'll sew along that stitching line. Now I'll trim my waistband seam allowances on both sides and also trim the corners. Then I'll turn the entire waistband right side out, poking out the corners. With the folded edge of the facing side of the waistband still pressed to the inside, we want the folded edge to just cover our main stitching line. And we're going to pin that folded edge in place, pinning from the right side of the garment. Now that I have the waistline pinned all the way around, with my pins just catching the bottom fold of the facing on the inside, I'm going to stitch in the ditch from the outside of the garment all around the top of the waistline. Now I can sew a buttonhole into the left side of the waistband, right in the center. Now we can attach a button to that waistband extension on the inside, sewing it in place across from your buttonhole. And now for the final hem. I've gone ahead and finished the raw edges all the way around the bottom of the garment and folded my hem allowance to the wrong side. Now I'll stitch close to those finishing stitches all the way around. And now the skirt is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. This skirt is a practical wardrobe staple great for any occasion. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for future sew alongs, and I'll see you in the next video.